The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the tarmac at Fort Rucker, turning the asphalt into a shimmering lake of heat waves. Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her greasy hand, leaving a streak of engine oil across her brown skin. For the past 6 hours, she had been elbow-deep in the engine compartment of an Apache AH-64D longbow, troubleshooting a hydraulic leak that had grounded the aircraft for 3 days. Maya was not supposed to be here. At 28 years old, she was a maintenance engineer, someone who fixed the flying death machines rather than piloted them. Her hands were more familiar with wrenches and circuit boards than flight controls. But, as she worked on the Apache's complex systems, something stirred within her that had nothing to do with routine maintenance, and everything to do with a dream she had buried 6 years ago. The Apache helicopter was a marvel of modern military engineering. Its twin General Electric T-700 engines could push the aircraft to speeds exceeding 180 miles per hour. The pilot and co-pilot gunner sat in tandem, surrounded by armor plating that could withstand small arms fire and some explosive fragments. Maya knew every bolt, every wire, every system that made this machine capable of delivering devastating firepower while keeping its crew alive in the most hostile environments on Earth. She had memorized the technical specifications not out of professional obligation, but out of genuine fascination. The Apache's M230 chain gun could fire 625 rounds per minute of 30mm explosive ammunition. Its Hellfire missiles could engage targets at ranges exceeding 5 miles with precision that could thread a needle. The aircraft's radar and targeting systems were so advanced that pilots often described flying it as being plugged directly into the digital nervous system of the modern battlefield. But Maya's interest went deeper than technical appreciation. Every time she watched an Apache lift off, its rotors chopping through the air with mechanical precision, she felt something that her fellow maintenance crew members could not understand. It was not just admiration for the machine, it was recognition of what the machine represented. Freedom, power, the ability to make a difference when everything was on the line. Her colleagues often joked about the pilots who flew these aircraft. They called them cowboys, adrenaline junkies who thought their expensive training made them superior to the people who actually kept their birds flying. Maya had heard the complaints countless times. Pilots who looked through maintenance crews like they were invisible. Officers who treated enlisted personnel like disposable parts in a larger machine they could not be bothered to understand. But Maya saw something different when she watched the pilots. She saw the weight they carried. The responsibility of operating weapons systems that could level city blocks or save countless lives depending on how they were used. She saw the focus required to process dozens of data streams simultaneously while flying at high speeds through enemy territory. Most importantly, she saw the brotherhood and sisterhood that existed among combat pilots, a bond forged through shared danger and mutual dependence that transcended rank and background. The maintenance bay where Maya worked was a cathedral of organized chaos. Tools hung from shadow boards with military precision. Parts bins were labeled and organized according to regulations that had been written in the blood of mechanics who had learned the hard way what happened when critical components went missing. The air smelled of hydraulic fluid, jet fuel, and the particular metallic odor that came from machinery pushed to its operational limits on a regular basis. Maya had been assigned to this unit 18 months ago, after completing advanced helicopter maintenance training at Fort Eustis. Her technical scores had been in the top 5% of her class, and her instructors had noted her exceptional ability to diagnose complex problems that stumped her peers. But academic excellence and technical competence were just the baseline requirements for military aviation maintenance. What set Maya apart was her intuitive understanding of how aircraft systems interacted with each other. She could feel when something was wrong with a helicopter before diagnostic equipment confirmed it. A slight vibration in the wrong frequency range. A hydraulic pressure reading that was technically within acceptable limits, but trending in a direction that suggested future problems. The sound of an engine that was running normally, but somehow different from how it should sound. Her supervisors had learned to trust her instincts even when computers insisted everything was functioning properly. This particular Apache had been challenging her for 3 days. The hydraulic leak was intermittent, appearing and disappearing without any obvious pattern. Maya had replaced seals, checked connections, and run every diagnostic test in the technical manual twice. According to every instrument and procedure, the aircraft should have been ready for flight operations. But something told her the problem was not solved. She was lying on her back underneath the aircraft, using a small mirror to examine a hydraulic line that ran behind the main transmission, when she heard footsteps approaching on the concrete floor. Multiple sets of boots, moving with the purposeful stride that indicated officers rather than enlisted personnel. Maya recognized the sound of a briefing group making their way toward the aircraft. Sergeant Rodriguez called a voice she recognized as belonging to Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, the senior maintenance supervisor. "You about finished with that bird?" Maya slid out from underneath the Apache, her uniform now decorated with a fresh collection of grease stains and metal shavings. She stood and came to attention as she saw the group that had assembled near the aircraft. Chief Thompson was there, along with Captain Williams from the aviation unit, and two men Maya did not recognize. One wore the silver oak leaves of a lieutenant colonel, and the other had the distinctive 4 stars of a full colonel. "Almost done, Chief," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the sudden appearance of high-ranking officers. "I'm tracking down an intermittent hydraulic leak. All the standard tests show green, but I want to run one more diagnostic before I sign off on the aircraft." The lieutenant colonel stepped forward, consulting a tablet computer in his hand. "Sergeant, we need this bird ready for a mission brief in 2 hours. How much longer do you need?" Maya looked back at the Apache, then at the officers. She knew she could sign off on the aircraft right now. Technically, everything was within acceptable parameters. But her instincts were telling her something different, and 6 years of military training had taught her that instincts often meant the difference between coming home and becoming a statistic. "Sir, I'd like another hour to be certain. There's something about the hydraulic pressure curves that doesn't look right to me." The colonel frowned. "Sergeant, with respect, we have pilots with thousands of flight hours who are comfortable flying this aircraft based on your technical assessments. If the systems check out, we need to get moving." Maya felt the familiar tension that came with challenging authority, especially when that authority outranked her by several levels. But she also felt the weight of responsibility that came with being the last person to touch a machine before it carried human beings into potentially dangerous situations. "I understand, sir. But if there's a catastrophic hydraulic failure during flight operations, the best pilot in the world won't be able to save the aircraft or its crew. I just need one more hour to be sure." The colonel's expression shifted from impatience to something approaching respect. "Very well, Sergeant. You have 1 hour. But I want to understand what you're seeing that our instruments are missing." Maya led the group to her computer workstation, where she had been tracking hydraulic pressure data for the past 72 hours. The screen displayed a series of graphs that looked like electronic heartbeat monitors, each line representing a different system within the Apache's hydraulic network. "Here's what's bothering me," she said, pointing to a section of the graph where the lines showed minor variations. "These pressure fluctuations are all within normal operational parameters. But look at the pattern. Every 6 to 8 hours, there's a small spike in the auxiliary hydraulic system that lasts for about 30 seconds, then returns to normal." The lieutenant colonel studied the screen. "Those spikes are barely outside the noise level of the sensors. They're well within acceptable limits." "Yes, sir," Maya agreed. "But they're also getting slightly larger each time they occur. It's a progression that suggests a seal or connection that's degrading slowly. If the pattern continues, we could see a significant failure within the next 20 to 30 flight hours." Captain Williams stepped closer to the screen. "Rodriguez, you're talking about a failure rate projection based on sensor data that's barely distinguishable from normal system variations. That's a pretty thin basis for grounding an aircraft." Maya nodded. "You're right, sir. It is thin. But I've seen this pattern before, on a Black Hawk we were maintaining in Germany. The data looked almost identical. We ignored it because everything tested within parameters. 3 weeks later, the aircraft suffered a complete hydraulic failure during a training exercise. The crew made it down safely, but just barely." The room fell silent as the officers processed this information. Maya realized she had just admitted to making a decision based on experience rather than strict adherence to technical regulations. In the military, this could be seen as either wisdom or insubordination, depending on the outcome. The colonel with 4 stars, who had remained silent throughout the discussion, finally spoke. "Sergeant, what's your recommendation?" Maya straightened. "Sir, I recommend we replace the auxiliary hydraulic accumulator and its associated fittings. It's a 4-hour job, but it will eliminate the potential failure point. If I'm wrong, we lose 4 hours and the cost of some parts. If I'm right, we prevent a potential catastrophic failure." The colonel nodded slowly. "Make it happen, Sergeant." Captain Williams, adjust the mission schedule accordingly. As the officers began to leave, Maya felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had successfully advocated for what she believed was the right course of action, but she had also committed herself to being right. If the replacement parts revealed no problems, she would look like an overly cautious technician who had delayed important operations based on insufficient evidence. She was gathering her tools to begin the repair work when she heard her name called from across the maintenance bay. Maya turned to see Sergeant First Class Jennifer Park, her closest friend in the unit, approaching with a concerned expression. "Maya, what was that all about?" "I saw enough brass over here to start a war." Maya explained the hydraulic issue and her decision to replace the accumulator. Jennifer listened carefully, nodding at the technical details. As a fellow maintenance specialist, she understood the challenge of making decisions based on incomplete information. "So you're betting your reputation on a hunch about hydraulic pressure variations that are barely outside sensor noise," Jennifer summarized. "Pretty much," Maya admitted. "But, Jen, I've got 6 years of experience telling me something's wrong with that bird. I can't put my signature on a maintenance log if I'm not confident the aircraft is safe." Jennifer smiled. "That's why you're the best mechanic in this unit, Maya. You actually give a damn about the people who have to fly these things." As Maya began the process of removing the Apache's auxiliary hydraulic accumulator, she reflected on Jennifer's comment. She did care about the pilots and crew members who trusted their lives to the machines she maintained. But her concern went beyond professional responsibility. Every time she signed off on an aircraft, she imagined herself in the cockpit, depending on the work she had done to bring her home safely. This was not an abstract exercise for Maya. She had grown up around aviation, watching her father maintain civilian aircraft at a small airport in New Mexico. She had learned to see aircraft not as machines, but as partnerships between human skill and mechanical precision. When that partnership worked correctly, it could accomplish incredible things. When it failed, people died. The auxiliary hydraulic accumulator was located in a compartment that required Maya to remove several other components to gain access. As she worked, she found herself thinking about the pilots who would eventually fly this Apache. She wondered about their families, their hopes, their fears. Did they have children waiting for them to come home? Spouses who watched the news and worried every time a military aircraft was mentioned? These thoughts were not unusual for Maya. She had always been able to see the human dimension of her work in ways that some of her colleagues found distracting. To them, an aircraft was a collection of systems that needed to function according to specifications. To Maya, an aircraft was a life support system for people who had volunteered to put themselves in harm's way for reasons larger than themselves. After 2 hours of careful disassembly, Maya finally had the hydraulic accumulator removed from the aircraft. As she examined the component under bright work lights, she felt her heart rate increase. There, along one of the seals, was a hairline crack that was barely visible to the naked eye. It was exactly the kind of defect that could cause intermittent pressure variations that would gradually worsen until catastrophic failure occurred. Maya called Chief Thompson over to examine the component. He studied the crack through a magnifying glass, then looked at Maya with an expression that mixed surprise with admiration. "How the hell did you know?" he asked. Maya shrugged. "Experience and luck, Chief. Mostly luck." But as she began the process of installing the replacement accumulator, Maya knew it was not just luck. It was the result of paying attention to details that others missed, caring about outcomes that extended beyond technical compliance, and trusting her instincts even when they contradicted official procedures. The replacement process took another 2 hours. When Maya finally completed the installation and ran a full systems check, the pressure variations that had been troubling her were completely gone. The Apache's hydraulic systems now performed with the mechanical precision that the aircraft's designers had intended. As she cleaned her tools and completed the maintenance paperwork, Maya found herself thinking about the mission that this Apache would soon be flying. She did not know the details, but she knew that somewhere, people were depending on this aircraft to function perfectly when everything was on the line. The work she had done today might be the difference between those people coming home safely or becoming casualties of mechanical failure. But as Maya looked at the Apache sitting ready for flight operations, she felt something beyond professional satisfaction. She felt a deep longing that she had been suppressing for years. Every time she signed off on an aircraft, every time she watched pilots climb into cockpits and disappear into the sky, she wondered what it would be like to be on the other side of that equation. To be the one trusting her life to the machine rather than the one preparing the machine to be trusted. Maya Rodriguez had never told anyone about her secret dream of becoming a pilot. It seemed impossible, impractical, and presumptuous. She was a maintenance engineer, not an officer. She had not gone to college, had not attended flight school, had not followed any of the traditional paths that led to military aviation careers. But, as she stood in the maintenance bay, surrounded by the tools of her trade and the aircraft she knew better than most pilots, Maya began to wonder if impossible was just another technical problem waiting for the right solution. The mess hall at Fort Rucker buzzed with the usual evening conversations of soldiers unwinding after a long day of training and operations. Maya sat at a corner table with Jennifer Park and two other maintenance specialists, picking at a plate of food that had long since grown cold. Her mind was still processing the events of the afternoon, the successful diagnosis of the hydraulic problem, and the brief moment of recognition she had received from the senior officers. "You've been quiet since you fixed that Apache," Jennifer observed, cutting into her meatloaf with military precision. "Something bothering you about the repair?" Maya shook her head. The repair was solid. The crack in the accumulator seal was exactly what I thought it would be. "No, it's something else." Sergeant Mike Torres, a power plant specialist who had served with Maya for over a year, looked up from his dinner. "Come on, Rodriguez. You just saved a crew from potential catastrophic failure and impressed a full colonel in the process. You should be celebrating, not brooding." "That's just it," Maya said, setting down her fork. "I spend all my time making sure these aircraft are perfect for other people to fly. I know every system, every component, every limitation better than most of the pilots who strap themselves into the cockpit. But I'm always on the ground, watching other people live the dream I didn't even know I had until today." The table fell silent. Maya rarely talked about personal ambitions or dreams. She was known for her technical expertise and dry sense of humor, not for philosophical discussions about unfulfilled potential. Jennifer leaned forward. "Maya, are you saying you want to become a pilot?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a misfiring engine. Maya realized she had never actually spoken the words out loud before, had never made the abstract longing concrete by giving it a name. "I think I am," she said quietly. "I think I want to fly." Mike laughed, but not unkindly. "Rodriguez, you're 28 years old, you're enlisted, and you don't have a college degree. The path to becoming a military pilot is pretty much set in stone, and it doesn't include people in our situation. Besides," added Specialist Sarah Kim, the fourth member of their group, "pilots are officers. You'd have to go through officer candidate school, flight training, the whole 9 yards. That's years of commitment, and there's no guarantee you'd even be selected." Maya nodded. She knew the obstacles were significant. Military aviation was one of the most competitive career fields in the armed forces. Pilots were typically commissioned officers who had been selected for flight training based on a combination of academic performance, physical fitness, psychological evaluation, and leadership potential. The process was designed to identify individuals who could handle the mental and physical demands of operating complex weapon systems in high-stress environments. But, as she sat in the mess hall, surrounded by the casual conversation of her fellow soldiers, Maya found herself thinking about the Apache she had repaired that afternoon. She remembered the feeling of satisfaction that came from solving a complex technical problem, but also the sense of incompleteness that came from never seeing the results of her work in action. "What if there was another way?" she asked. Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I've been reading about the Army's Warrant Officer Flight Program," Maya said. "It's designed for enlisted personnel who want to become pilots without going through the traditional officer commissioning process. Warrant officers are technical specialists, not traditional leaders. They're the people who become expert pilots without necessarily commanding troops or managing large operations." Mike shook his head. "Maya, the Warrant Officer Flight Program is incredibly competitive. They take maybe 200 people a year out of thousands of applicants. And most of those people are already in aviation-related career fields." "I am in an aviation-related career field," Maya pointed out. "I maintain helicopters. I understand their systems better than most warrant officer candidates who come from infantry or armor units." Sarah looked skeptical. "But you don't have flight experience. Have you ever even been up in a helicopter?" Maya admitted she had not. Her entire aviation experience consisted of working on aircraft while they remained firmly planted on the ground. But she also knew that many successful military pilots had started with no flight experience whatsoever. The military flight training programs were designed to take individuals with the right aptitude and mental characteristics and teach them everything they needed to know about flying complex aircraft. "Look," Maya said, "I'm not saying it would be easy. I'm not even saying it's realistic. But for the first time in my career, I'm wondering what it would be like to do something more than just maintain other people's dreams. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Chief Warrant Officer Thompson, who approached their table with a serious expression. Maya's colleagues immediately straightened in their seats, unsure whether Thompson's presence indicated official business or casual conversation. Rodriguez, Thompson said, I need to talk to you about something. Can you spare a few minutes? Maya followed Thompson to an empty table on the other side of the mess hall. He sat down across from her and studied her face for a moment before speaking. That hydraulic accumulator you replaced today, he began. The lab analysis confirmed that it would have failed catastrophically within the next 15 to 20 flight hours. You probably saved lives with that call. Maya felt a mixture of relief and pride. Thank you, Chief. I'm glad my instincts were right. Thompson nodded. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Your instincts. In 6 years of supervising aircraft maintenance, I've never seen anyone with your ability to diagnose problems that don't show up on standard tests. You think about these machines differently than other technicians. I'm not sure what you mean, Chief. I mean you understand aircraft as complete systems rather than collections of parts. Most mechanics can follow troubleshooting procedures and replace components according to technical manuals. But you seem to have an intuitive grasp of how all the systems work together. That's a rare skill, Rodriguez. Maya waited for Thompson to continue, unsure where the conversation was heading. I've been thinking about recommending you for the Advanced Maintenance Supervisor course, Thompson said. It would mean promotion to Staff Sergeant, more responsibility, and eventually the opportunity to oversee maintenance operations for an entire aviation unit. It was an opportunity that Maya should have been excited about. Advanced maintenance supervisors were respected professionals who played critical roles in aviation operations. They were the technical experts who ensured that aircraft were ready for combat missions, training exercises, and humanitarian operations. The career path Thompson was suggesting would lead to financial security, professional recognition, and the satisfaction of being exceptionally good at important work. But, as Maya listened to Thompson's offer, she felt a growing sense of disconnection from the future he was describing. She pictured herself in 5 years, 10 years, still on the ground, still watching other people fly the aircraft she maintained, still wondering what it would feel like to see the world from the cockpit instead of the maintenance bay. Chief, Maya said carefully, can I ask you something? Thompson nodded. Have you ever wanted to do something completely different with your life? Something that probably didn't make sense from a practical standpoint, but felt like what you were supposed to be doing. Thompson's expression shifted to something Maya had never seen from him before. For a moment, the professional mask slipped, revealing something more personal and vulnerable. Rodriguez, I've been in aircraft maintenance for 18 years. I've worked on everything from Chinooks to Black Hawks to Apaches. I'm good at what I do, and I find satisfaction in keeping aircraft flying safely. But, yeah, there have been times when I've watched pilots take off and wondered what I was missing. Maya felt a sudden connection with her supervisor that went beyond their professional relationship. What stopped you from pursuing it? Thompson smiled ruefully. Practicality. Fear. The belief that people like us don't become pilots. We just support the people who do. But, Rodriguez, you're 28 years old. You've got time to make choices I couldn't make when I was your age. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Captain Williams, who approached their table with a folder in his hand and an expression that suggested official business. Chief Thompson, Sergeant Rodriguez, Captain Williams said, taking a seat at their table. I wanted to follow up on today's maintenance issue. Maya braced herself for what she assumed would be either praise for catching a potential problem or criticism for delaying operations based on insufficient evidence. Sergeant, Williams continued, your diagnosis saved my unit a significant amount of trouble. But, more importantly, it demonstrated exactly the kind of technical judgment we need in our aviation maintenance personnel. Williams opened the folder and pulled out a document that Maya recognized as an Army form requesting personnel for special assignments. I'm putting together a team to support a deployment to Afghanistan in 6 months, Williams said. It's a forward operating base where we'll be supporting special operations with close air support and reconnaissance missions. The maintenance requirements are going to be challenging, and I need technicians who can think on their feet and solve problems without access to depot-level support. Maya looked at the document, which outlined a 12-month deployment to a location where aircraft maintenance would be performed under combat conditions, with limited resources and high operational demands. Sir, Maya said, this sounds like an incredible opportunity, but can I ask about something else? Williams raised an eyebrow. What's on your mind, Sergeant? Maya took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say could either open doors or close them permanently. Sir, I've been thinking about applying for the warrant officer flight program. I know it's a long shot, and I know there are a lot of obstacles, but I wanted to ask your opinion about whether someone with my background would even be considered. The table fell silent. Maya could feel Thompson's surprise and Williams's careful evaluation of her question. She had just turned down a deployment opportunity and a promotion track to ask about pursuing what most people would consider an impossible dream. Williams leaned back in his chair. Rodriguez, that's an interesting question. The Warrant Officer Flight Program is designed for people who want to become technical experts in aviation rather than traditional military leaders. In theory, your maintenance background would be a significant advantage. In theory, Maya repeated. In practice, Williams continued, the selection process is incredibly competitive. You'd be competing against people who already have flight experience, college degrees, and perfect military records. But, Rodriguez, after what I saw today, I think you might have something that test scores and academic credentials can't measure. Maya felt her heart rate increase. What do you mean, sir? You understand aircraft at a level that most people never reach, even after years of flying them. You think about these machines as complete systems, and you have the kind of instincts that can't be taught in a classroom. Those are exactly the qualities the Warrant Officer Program is looking for. Thompson nodded agreement. Sir, I've been supervising Rodriguez for 18 months, and I've never seen anyone with her ability to diagnose complex problems. She doesn't just fix aircraft, she understands them. Williams studied Maya's face. Sergeant, if you're serious about this, I'll support your application. But you need to understand what you're getting into. The selection process takes months. If you're accepted, flight training takes another 18 months. You'd be starting over professionally, giving up advancement opportunities in maintenance, and competing against people who have been preparing for this their entire careers. Maya nodded. I understand, sir. But I also understand that I'll regret it for the rest of my life if I don't try. Williams smiled. That's the right answer, Rodriguez. The Warrant Officer Flight Program applications are due in 6 weeks. You'll need to complete a flight physical, take the selection instrument for flight training test, and write a personal statement explaining why you want to become a pilot. As Williams and Thompson discussed the details of the application process, Maya felt something she had never experienced before. For the first time in her military career, she was not just following a predetermined path or accepting assignments based on the needs of the service. She was actively choosing a direction for her life that aligned with something deep inside her that she was only beginning to understand. But she also felt the weight of uncertainty that came with making decisions that could not be easily reversed. If she was accepted into flight training and failed, she would return to aircraft maintenance with the knowledge that she had reached for something beyond her grasp. If she was not accepted, she would face the disappointment of having her limitations clearly defined by an official selection process. As the conversation concluded and the officers departed, Maya found herself alone in the mess hall, which had emptied as soldiers returned to their barracks for the evening. She sat in the fluorescent light, thinking about the choice she had just made to pursue something that 6 hours ago had been nothing more than a vague, unnamed longing. Outside, she could hear the sound of helicopters conducting night training exercises. The distinctive rhythm of rotor blades cutting through the darkness was a sound she had heard thousands of times before. But tonight, as Maya listened to aircraft she had probably maintained disappearing into the night sky, the sound meant something different. Tonight, that sound represented possibility. The selection instrument for flight training test was scheduled for 0800 hours on a Tuesday morning that felt like the most important day of Maya's military career. She had spent 6 weeks preparing for this moment, studying aviation theory, practicing spatial reasoning exercises, and trying to manage the anxiety that came with knowing that her performance over the next 4 hours would largely determine whether her pilot dreams had any chance of becoming reality. The testing facility at Fort Rucker was a sterile, windowless building that reminded Maya of the academic testing centers she remembered from high school. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of computer workstations where candidates from across the Army would demonstrate their aptitude for military aviation. Maya arrived 30 minutes early, as was her habit for anything important. She sat in her car in the parking lot, reviewing notes she had compiled during weeks of preparation. The SIFT test would evaluate her knowledge of aviation concepts, mechanical comprehension, spatial reasoning, and mathematical skills. But Maya knew that beyond the technical content, The test was designed to identify individuals who could process complex information quickly and accurately under pressure. As she walked toward the building, Maya noticed the other candidates arriving for the same testing session. Most appeared to be in their early 20s, and many carried themselves with the confidence that came from college educations and officer training programs. Maya was older than most of them, with calloused hands that marked her as someone who worked with tools rather than theories. But she reminded herself that her practical experience with aircraft systems was exactly the kind of background the Warrant Officer program was designed to leverage. The testing room contained 20 computer workstations arranged in precise rows. Maya selected a seat in the middle of the room, close enough to the proctor to ask questions if necessary, but far enough from potential distractions to maintain her concentration. As she settled into her chair, she noticed that her hands were steadier than she had expected. 6 weeks of preparation had given her confidence in her ability to handle the technical content of the test. The proctor, a civilian contractor who had clearly administered hundreds of these tests, provided brief instructions about test procedures and time limits. Maya listened carefully, but her attention was focused primarily on managing her mental state. She had learned from years of troubleshooting complex aircraft problems that success often depended on maintaining calm, systematic thinking even when under significant pressure. The first section of the test covered basic aviation knowledge. Maya found herself drawing on information she had absorbed through years of maintaining aircraft, supplemented by focused study of flight theory and navigation principles. Questions about lift, thrust, drag, and weight were familiar territory. Problems involving aircraft performance calculations reminded her of the maintenance planning work she did regularly. But as the test progressed into more complex areas, Maya encountered material that challenged her in ways she had not fully anticipated. Spatial reasoning problems required her to mentally manipulate three-dimensional objects and predict how they would appear from different perspectives. Some questions involved mathematical relationships that went beyond the technical calculations she was familiar with from maintenance work. Maya forced herself to work methodically through each problem, resisting the temptation to spend too much time on questions that seemed particularly difficult. The test was designed to be challenging, and she knew that perfect scores were neither expected nor necessary. Her goal was to demonstrate competence across all areas while showing particular strength in the mechanical and technical sections where her background provided advantages. During the mechanical comprehension section, Maya felt the confidence that came from working with her hands for 6 years. Questions about gear ratios, hydraulic systems, and electrical circuits were problems she solved regularly in her daily work. She found herself visualizing the actual components she had installed, repaired, and troubleshot, translating theoretical questions into practical scenarios she understood completely. The most challenging section involved complex coordination tasks that simulated the mental demands of piloting aircraft. Maya was required to track multiple moving objects on a computer screen while simultaneously responding to audio cues and mathematical problems. The exercise was designed to evaluate her ability to divide attention between competing tasks while maintaining accuracy and speed. As Maya worked through these multitasking exercises, she began to understand something fundamental about piloting that her maintenance experience had not fully prepared her for. Flying was not just about understanding aircraft systems. It was about processing and responding to multiple streams of information simultaneously while making split-second decisions that could have life or death consequences. But rather than being intimidated by this realization, Maya found herself energized by it. The mental challenge was exactly what had been missing from her maintenance work. She had always been capable of more than the routine troubleshooting and component replacement that defined her daily responsibilities. The coordination exercises felt like puzzles that engaged parts of her mind that had been underutilized for years. When the 4-hour testing session concluded, Maya felt emotionally drained, but cautiously optimistic. She had completed all sections of the test within the time limits, and her performance had felt solid if not spectacular. Most importantly, the experience had confirmed her belief that she wanted to pursue military aviation regardless of the challenges involved. 3 weeks later, Maya received the phone call that would change the trajectory of her military career. Chief Warrant Officer Thompson found her in the maintenance bay, working on routine inspections, and informed her that Captain Williams wanted to see her in his office immediately. Maya's heart rate spiked as she walked across the base toward the aviation unit headquarters. Phone calls from command personnel could mean anything from routine administrative matters to significant changes in assignment or status. She had been waiting for SIF test results for 21 days, and every day without news had increased her anxiety about the outcome. Captain Williams's office was located in a building that housed the administrative functions of the aviation unit. Maya knocked on the door frame and was invited to enter a space that reflected the organized efficiency she had come to expect from military aviation personnel. Flight charts covered one wall, and Williams's desk was arranged with the precise organization that suggested someone accustomed to managing complex operations. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Williams said, gesturing for her to take a seat across from his desk. "I have some news about your warrant officer flight program application." Maya sat down and tried to read Williams's expression for clues about whether the news was positive or negative. His professional demeanor revealed nothing, which she interpreted as either very good or very bad. "Sir," Maya said, "I'm ready for whatever you have to tell me." Williams opened a folder on his desk and pulled out a document that Maya recognized as official correspondence from the Army Aviation Branch. "Sergeant, you scored in the 92nd percentile on the SIF test. Your mechanical comprehension scores were in the 98th percentile, which is the highest I've seen from anyone in this unit." Maya felt a surge of relief and excitement that she tried to control. High test scores were necessary, but not sufficient for acceptance into the flight program. The selection process involved multiple evaluation criteria, and test performance was just one component of a holistic assessment. "That's very encouraging, sir," Maya said. "What are the next steps?" Williams smiled, and for the first time since Maya had entered his office, his expression suggested genuinely positive news. "Rodriguez, you've been selected for the next phase of the warrant officer flight program. You'll report to Fort Navasel in Alabama in 8 weeks for the warrant officer candidate school phase of training." Maya felt the world shift around her in a way that was both exhilarating and terrifying. After 6 years of maintaining aircraft for other people to fly, she had been given the opportunity to become a pilot herself. The dream that had seemed impossible 6 weeks ago was now a concrete assignment with a reporting date and official orders. "Sir," Maya said, "I don't know what to say. Thank you for supporting my application." Williams leaned back in his chair. "Rodriguez, you earned this opportunity. Your test scores, your maintenance record, and your demonstrated technical judgment convinced the selection board that you have the potential to become an exceptional warrant officer pilot." As Maya listened to Williams explain the details of her upcoming training, she began to understand the magnitude of the commitment she was making. Warrant officer candidate school would last 6 weeks and would challenge her leadership abilities, physical fitness, and mental resilience. Following that, she would begin actual flight training, which could last anywhere from 12 to 18 months depending on the type of aircraft she was assigned to fly. "Sir," Maya asked, "do you know what type of aircraft I'll be training on?" Williams consulted the document in front of him. "You've been assigned to the Apache AH-64D program. Apparently, your maintenance experience with that platform was a significant factor in your selection." Maya felt her breath catch. The Apache was the most sophisticated attack helicopter in the Army inventory, and Apache pilots were considered among the most elite aviators in military aviation. The aircraft she had been maintaining, troubleshooting, and repairing for the past 18 months would become the machine she would learn to fly. The irony was not lost on her. Maya had probably spent more time working on Apache helicopters than many of the pilots who flew them. She knew the aircraft systems better than most warrant officers who had completed flight training. But there was an enormous difference between understanding how an aircraft worked and being able to fly it effectively in complex, high-pressure situations. "Rodriguez," Williams said, "I want you to understand something. Getting selected for flight training is a significant achievement, but it's just the beginning. The next 2 years are going to be the most challenging of your military career. The washout rate for Apache training is substantial, and you'll be competing against people who have been preparing for this opportunity their entire lives." Maya nodded. "Sir, I understand the challenges, but I also understand that this is what I want to do with my life." Williams studied her face for a moment. "Rodriguez, in my experience, the people who succeed in military aviation are not necessarily the ones with the highest test scores or the most natural talent. They're the people who want it badly enough to push through the frustration, exhaustion, and self-doubt that are inevitable parts of learning to fly complex aircraft." As Maya left Williams's office, she felt a combination of excitement, anxiety, and determination that was unlike anything she had experienced in her military career. For the first time, She was pursuing something that aligned with her deepest professional aspirations rather than simply accepting assignments based on the needs of the service. But she also felt the weight of responsibility that came with being given an opportunity that thousands of other soldiers would never receive. Maya knew that her success or failure in flight training would not just determine her own career trajectory. It would also influence how future candidates from similar backgrounds would be evaluated. That evening, Maya called her parents in New Mexico to share the news. Her father, who had spent 40 years maintaining civilian aircraft, listened quietly as she explained her selection for warrant officer flight training. "Mija," he said finally, using the Spanish endearment she had heard throughout her childhood, "I always knew you understood airplanes differently than other mechanics. Maybe it's time you learned what they feel like from the inside." Her mother was more concerned about the dangers associated with military aviation, but she also expressed pride in Maya's achievement. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said. "Flying is dangerous enough without adding combat training to the equation." Maya assured her parents that flight training emphasized safety above all other considerations, but she also knew that her mother's concerns were not unrealistic. Military aviation was inherently dangerous, and Apache pilots operated in environments where the margin for error was measured in seconds and inches. As Maya prepared for sleep that night, she found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 weeks ago, she had been a maintenance specialist with a vague, unnamed longing for something more meaningful than routine aircraft repairs. Tonight, she was 8 weeks away from beginning training that would transform her into a military pilot. But Maya also understood that selection for flight training was not the same as successful completion. The next 2 years would test every aspect of her character, intelligence, and determination. She would be challenged in ways she could not fully anticipate, and there was no guarantee that the dream she was pursuing would ultimately become reality. Outside her barracks window, Maya could hear the familiar sound of helicopters conducting night training exercises. Soon, instead of listening to those aircraft from the ground, she would be inside one of them, learning to master the complex skills that separated observers from participants in the world of military aviation. As she drifted toward sleep, Maya felt something she had never experienced before in her military career. For the first time, she was not just serving time or fulfilling obligations. She was pursuing a calling that might finally allow her to discover what she was truly capable of achieving. Fort Novosel, Alabama stretched across thousands of acres of pine forests and training fields that had been transforming civilians into military aviators for decades. Maya stepped off the bus that had transported her and 37 other warrant officer candidates from the airport, and immediately felt the oppressive humidity that characterized the Gulf Coast in late summer. The air was thick enough to swim through, and within minutes of arriving, her uniform was damp with perspiration. Warrant Officer Candidate School was designed to be a transformative experience that would challenge every aspect of her character, leadership potential, and ability to perform under pressure. Maya had spent the 8 weeks since her selection preparing physically and mentally for what she knew would be one of the most demanding periods of her military career. The reception process was conducted with the methodical efficiency that characterized all military training programs. Maya and her fellow candidates were issued room assignments, training schedules, and equipment that would support them through 6 weeks of intensive evaluation. They were informed that approximately 25% of candidates would not successfully complete the program, and that academic, physical, and leadership failures could result in immediate dismissal and return to their previous military occupations. Maya's roommate was Emily Chun, a former military police officer from California who had scored exceptionally high on the SIF test and demonstrated leadership potential during her previous assignments. Emily was 24 years old, possessed a college degree in engineering, and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being successful in competitive environments. "So you're the maintenance specialist everyone's talking about," Emily said as they arranged their personal items in the austere barracks room they would share for the next 6 weeks. "I heard you had the highest mechanical comprehension scores in the program." Maya was surprised that her test performance had become common knowledge among the candidates. "I've been working on helicopters for 6 years. I guess that experience helped with the technical questions." Emily nodded. "That's going to be a significant advantage during flight training. Most of us are going to have to learn aircraft systems from scratch, but you already understand how everything works." As Maya settled into the rhythm of warrant officer candidate training, she discovered that her mechanical background was indeed helpful, but in ways she had not anticipated. The program was designed to develop leadership skills, decision-making abilities, and the kind of mental toughness required for military aviation. While her technical knowledge was valuable, success in the program depended more on her ability to manage stress, work effectively in teams, and maintain performance standards even when exhausted and overwhelmed. The daily schedule began at 500 hours with physical training that pushed candidates to their limits and beyond. Maya had always maintained good physical fitness, but the intensity and duration of the exercise program exceeded anything she had experienced during her previous military training. Running, obstacle courses, and strength training were designed not just to improve physical conditioning, but to evaluate how candidates performed when their bodies were pushed beyond normal comfort levels. Academic instruction covered military history, aviation theory, leadership principles, and the legal and ethical frameworks that govern military operations. Maya found herself studying subjects that went far beyond the technical knowledge she had acquired during her maintenance career. She learned about air traffic control procedures, flight planning, navigation systems, and the complex coordination required for multi-aircraft operations. But the most challenging aspect of Warrant Officer Candidate School was the leadership training that evaluated how candidates performed when given responsibility for the success or failure of their peers. Maya was assigned rotating leadership positions that required her to plan and execute training exercises, manage group dynamics, and make decisions under pressure while being evaluated by instructors who were experts in identifying leadership potential. During the third week of training, Maya was assigned as the leader for a field exercise that simulated emergency response procedures for aircraft accidents. She was given a scenario involving a hypothetical helicopter crash, limited resources, and time constraints that required her to coordinate rescue operations while managing the safety of her fellow candidates. Maya approached the exercise by drawing on her maintenance experience with aircraft accidents and emergency procedures. She understood the technical aspects of helicopter crashes better than most candidates, and she was able to develop response plans that reflected realistic assessments of what could and could not be accomplished given the available resources and time constraints. But Maya also discovered that technical knowledge was not sufficient for effective leadership. She had to communicate her plans clearly to people who did not share her technical background, motivate team members who were exhausted and stressed, and adapt her approach when circumstances changed unexpectedly during the exercise. The exercise began at dawn with Maya's team being transported to a remote area of the training facility where instructors had established a realistic simulation of a helicopter crash site. Maya had 30 minutes to assess the situation, develop a response plan, and begin executing rescue operations that would be evaluated based on speed, safety, and effectiveness. As Maya surveyed the simulated crash site, she immediately recognized details that indicated the type of accident that had occurred and the likely locations of crew members who might require rescue. Her maintenance experience allowed her to quickly assess which parts of the aircraft structure were safe to approach and which areas posed ongoing dangers from fuel leaks, electrical hazards, or unstable wreckage. Maya divided her team into 3 groups with specific responsibilities. 2 candidates with medical training were assigned to search for and treat injured personnel. For candidates with the best physical conditioning were assigned to clear debris and create safe access routes to the aircraft. The remaining team members were tasked with establishing communication with higher headquarters and coordinating the arrival of additional resources. But as the exercise progressed, Maya encountered challenges that had nothing to do with technical knowledge or emergency procedures. One of her team members became overwhelmed by the stress of the simulation and began making poor decisions that endangered the safety of other candidates. Another team member questioned Maya's authority and suggested alternative approaches that contradicted her carefully developed plan. Maya realized that effective leadership required her to balance technical competence with interpersonal skills she had not fully developed during her maintenance career. She had to provide clear direction while remaining flexible enough to incorporate good ideas from team members. She had to maintain team morale while making difficult decisions about resource allocation and risk management. The exercise concluded after 2 hours with a comprehensive evaluation session where instructors critiqued every aspect of Maya's leadership performance. She received high marks for technical competence and situational awareness, but was advised to work on communication skills and team management techniques that would be essential for success as a warrant officer. Rodriguez, said Chief Warrant Officer Martinez, the senior instructor who had observed the exercise. "You understand emergency procedures better than most candidates we see. But leadership is not just about having the right answers. It's about inspiring other people to perform at their best even when conditions are difficult." Maya took the feedback seriously and spent the remaining weeks of Warrant Officer Candidate School focused on developing leadership skills that complemented her technical expertise. She practiced public speaking, studied team management techniques, and sought opportunities to support other candidates who were struggling with various aspects of the training program. During the 5th week of training, Maya faced her most significant challenge when she was assigned to lead a night navigation exercise that required her team to move through unfamiliar terrain using only map and compass while maintaining communication protocols and meeting strict time requirements. The exercise began at 2,200 hours under conditions that simulated the visibility and coordination challenges of military operations in hostile environments. Maya was responsible for planning the route, coordinating team movement, and ensuring that all candidates reached designated checkpoints safely and on schedule. Maya had studied topographical maps of the training area extensively, but she quickly discovered that navigating through dense forest at night was fundamentally different from reading maps under classroom conditions. Terrain features that were clearly marked on paper were difficult to identify in darkness, and maintaining team cohesion while moving through thick vegetation required constant communication and leadership. Halfway through the exercise, Maya's team encountered an unexpected obstacle when heavy rain made stream crossings dangerous and reduced visibility to less than 10 meters. Maya had to make a real-time decision about whether to continue with the original plan or modify the route to ensure team safety. Drawing on her maintenance experience with risk assessment and decision-making under pressure, Maya decided to alter the route to avoid the most dangerous stream crossing while still meeting the exercise objectives. She gathered her team, explained the situation clearly, and implemented the modified plan with confidence that inspired trust from other candidates. The exercise concluded successfully, with Maya's team completing all objectives safely and within the required time limits. During the evaluation session, instructors noted her ability to adapt to changing conditions while maintaining team safety and mission focus. As Warrant Officer Candidate School entered its final week, Maya felt a growing confidence in her ability to succeed in flight training. She had demonstrated technical competence, leadership potential, and the mental resilience required for military aviation. But she also understood that completion of candidate school was just the beginning of her journey toward becoming a pilot. On graduation day, Maya stood with 29 other candidates who had successfully completed the 6-week program. 8 candidates had been eliminated due to academic failures, physical fitness deficiencies, or leadership inadequacies. Maya felt pride in her achievement, but also understood that the real challenges lay ahead. Chief Warrant Officer Martinez delivered the graduation address, emphasizing that Warrant Officer Candidate School had prepared them for the responsibilities of military leadership, but that flight training would test them in entirely different ways. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martinez said, "you've proven that you can handle the basic requirements of military leadership. Now you're going to learn whether you can master the most complex machines in the military inventory while making life and death decisions at 200 miles per hour." Following the graduation ceremony, Maya received her assignment orders for the next phase of training. She would report to Fort Navicel's flight training facility in 2 weeks to begin the Apache AH-64D pilot training program. The course would last 18 months and would cover everything from basic flight maneuvers to complex weapons systems employment. That evening, Maya called her parents to share the news of her graduation and upcoming flight training assignment. Her father listened as she described the challenges of Warrant Officer Candidate School and her excitement about beginning pilot training. "Mija," he said, "your grandmother always said that some people are born to fix things and other people are born to fly them. Maybe you were born to do both." Maya smiled at the memory of her grandmother, who had died when Maya was 16 but who had always encouraged her to pursue ambitious goals regardless of the obstacles involved. As Maya prepared for sleep on her final night at Warrant Officer Candidate School, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, she had been a maintenance specialist with an impossible dream. Now, she was 2 weeks away from beginning training that would transform her into an Apache pilot. But Maya also understood that her most significant challenges were still ahead. Learning to fly an Apache helicopter would require her to master skills that went far beyond anything she had accomplished during her maintenance career. She would have to develop the split-second decision-making abilities that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones, and she would have to prove that her technical knowledge could be translated into practical flying skills. Outside the barracks, Maya could hear the familiar sound of helicopters conducting night training operations. Soon, instead of listening to those aircraft from the ground, she would be inside one of them, learning to master the complex skills that would define the rest of her military career. As she drifted toward sleep, Maya felt something that had become familiar during the past few months. She was no longer just hoping for opportunities. She was actively creating them through her own determination and effort. Tomorrow would begin the next phase of a journey that would either fulfill her deepest professional aspirations or teach her important lessons about the limits of individual ambition. But, regardless of the outcome, Maya knew she would face the challenges ahead with the same systematic approach that had served her well during 6 years of aircraft maintenance and 6 weeks of warrant officer candidate school. She would prepare thoroughly, work harder than anyone expected, and trust in her ability to learn whatever skills were necessary for success. The Apache flight training facility at Fort Novosel was a complex of hangars, classrooms, and flight simulators that represented the pinnacle of military aviation instruction. Maya arrived for her first day of flight training with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy that had kept her awake for most of the previous night. After 8 months of preparation, testing, and preliminary training, she was finally going to learn to fly the aircraft she had been maintaining for years. The Apache AH-64D Longbow was the most sophisticated attack helicopter in the world, and training pilots to operate it safely and effectively required a carefully structured program that combined academic instruction, simulator training, and actual flight experience. Maya would spend the next 18 months learning to master every system, procedure, and tactical employment technique associated with the aircraft. Her primary flight instructor was Chief Warrant Officer 3 Rebecca Sullivan, a combat veteran with over 15 years of Apache experience and a reputation for producing exceptional pilots. Sullivan was known for her demanding standards, attention to detail, and ability to identify potential problems before they became safety hazards. "Rodriguez," Sullivan said during their first meeting, "I understand you have extensive maintenance experience with the Apache. That's going to be both an advantage and a potential problem during your training." Maya was surprised by the suggestion that her technical background could be problematic. "Ma'am, can you explain what you mean?" Sullivan leaned back in her chair. "Your maintenance experience gives you a better understanding of aircraft systems than most student pilots. But flying an aircraft is fundamentally different from working on it. You're going to have to learn to think like a pilot rather than a technician, and sometimes that means trusting the aircraft to do things that might seem counterintuitive from a mechanical perspective." The first phase of Apache training focused on basic flight maneuvers and emergency procedures. Maya learned to start the engines, perform pre-flight inspections, and execute fundamental flying skills like hovering, forward flight, and landing approaches. The Apache was unlike any aircraft she had ever imagined piloting. It was powerful, responsive, and unforgiving of mistakes. Maya's first actual flight in an Apache took place on a clear Tuesday morning in October. She sat in the front seat of the aircraft, with Sullivan occupying the rear pilot position where she could take control if necessary. Maya had spent dozens of hours in flight simulators, but nothing had prepared her for the physical and mental intensity of actually flying the real aircraft. As Maya followed Sullivan's instructions to bring the Apache to a hover, she felt the incredible power of the twin-turbine engines transmitted through the flight controls. The aircraft responded to her inputs with mechanical precision, but Maya quickly discovered that flying required constant attention and correction. The Apache did not fly itself. It required continuous pilot input to maintain stable flight. "Rodriguez," Sullivan's voice came through the intercom system. "You're over-controlling the aircraft. Trust the machine to respond to small inputs rather than fighting it with large control movements." Maya forced herself to relax her grip on the flight controls and make smaller, more deliberate adjustments. Gradually, she began to feel the aircraft settle into stable flight patterns that required less effort to maintain. But she also realized that developing the muscle memory and instinctive responses required for safe flying would take months of practice. During her third week of flight training, Maya encountered her first significant challenge when Sullivan introduced advanced maneuvering techniques that pushed the Apache to the limits of its performance envelope. Maya was required to execute steep approaches, aggressive turns, and emergency landing procedures that demanded precise coordination and split-second timing. Maya found herself drawing on her maintenance experience in unexpected ways. Her understanding of the aircraft systems helped her recognize when the Apache was operating outside normal parameters, and her mechanical knowledge allowed her to interpret engine sounds and control responses that indicated potential problems. But Maya also discovered that technical knowledge was not sufficient for effective flying. The Apache demanded a level of spatial awareness, multitasking ability, and decision-making speed that went beyond anything she had experienced during maintenance work. She had to process information from multiple displays simultaneously while controlling the aircraft's movement and monitoring radio communications. The most challenging aspect of Apache training was learning to operate the aircraft's weapons systems. The Apache was not just a flying machine. It was a sophisticated weapons platform capable of engaging multiple targets at extended ranges with precision-guided missiles and high-explosive cannon fire. Maya had to master targeting procedures, weapons employment techniques, and the complex coordination required for effective combat operations. During her 4th month of training, Maya participated in her first live-fire exercise, where she would actually shoot missiles and cannon rounds at target ranges under carefully controlled conditions. The exercise was designed to evaluate her ability to operate the Apache's weapons systems while maintaining safe flight operations. Maya felt the weight of responsibility that came with controlling weapons capable of destroying armored vehicles and buildings. The M230 chain gun mounted beneath the Apache could fire 625 rounds per minute of 30mm high-explosive ammunition. The Hellfire missiles carried by the aircraft could engage targets at ranges exceeding 5 miles with pinpoint accuracy. As Maya approached the target range, Sullivan's voice came through the intercom with final instructions. Rodriguez, remember that weapons employment is just another system to manage. Don't let the firepower distract you from basic flying skills. Fly the aircraft first, shoot second. Maya lined up on the first target, a decommissioned tank positioned at a range of 2 miles. She activated the aircraft's targeting system, acquired the target through the helmet-mounted display, and waited for the optimal firing solution. When all parameters were within acceptable ranges, Maya squeezed the trigger and felt the aircraft shudder slightly as a Hellfire missile separated from its mounting pylon. The missile streaked toward the target with a trail of white smoke, covering the 2-mile distance in less than 10 seconds before impacting the tank with an explosion that Maya could see and feel even from her distant position. The precision and destructive power of the weapons system was both impressive and sobering. Maya continued the exercise by engaging targets with the Apache's cannon, learning to coordinate aircraft movement with weapons aiming while maintaining situational awareness of her position relative to other aircraft and ground obstacles. The mental demands of combat flying exceeded anything she had anticipated, requiring her to process and respond to multiple information streams simultaneously. As Maya progressed through flight training, she began to understand why the Apache was considered one of the most difficult aircraft in the military inventory to master. The machine demanded technical proficiency, tactical knowledge, and the kind of split-second decision-making that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. During her 8th month of training, Maya faced her most significant challenge when she was required to demonstrate night combat operations using night vision goggles. Flying in darkness with artificial vision systems required her to develop entirely new spatial awareness skills while operating complex weapons systems and coordinating with other aircraft. The night training flight took place during a moonless evening when natural light was minimal. Maya wore night vision goggles that amplified available light, but distorted depth perception and color recognition. The familiar landscape around Fort Novosel became an alien environment of green-tinted shadows and indistinct shapes. Rodriguez, Sullivan's voice crackled through the intercom. Night flying is about trusting your instruments and accepting that visual references are going to be limited. Don't try to see everything. Focus on managing the information that's available. Maya found night flying to be simultaneously more difficult and more rewarding than daytime operations. The technical challenges were greater, but the experience of operating a sophisticated aircraft through darkness with only artificial vision provided a sense of accomplishment that exceeded anything she had achieved during her maintenance career. As Maya entered the final phase of Apache training, she realized that she had been fundamentally transformed by the experience. The technical knowledge that had defined her identity for 6 years was now just one component of a much more complex skill set that included tactical thinking, split-second decision-making, and the kind of situational awareness that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones. The culminating event of Apache training was a comprehensive evaluation exercise that would determine whether Maya was qualified to serve as a combat-ready pilot. The exercise included academic testing, flight performance evaluation, and a complex mission simulation that required her to demonstrate mastery of all the skills she had learned during 18 months of training. Maya approached the final evaluation with confidence, tempered by respect for the challenge involved. She had successfully completed every phase of training, but she also understood that the evaluation would test her ability to integrate all of her knowledge and skills under pressure conditions that simulated actual combat operations. The mission simulation began at 0400 hours with a briefing that outlined a hypothetical combat scenario requiring close air support for ground forces engaged with enemy armor and personnel. Maya was assigned as the pilot in command for a 2-aircraft Apache formation tasked with neutralizing specific targets while coordinating with ground controllers and avoiding friendly fire incidents. As Maya lifted off from Fort Navicelle in the pre-dawn darkness, she felt the weight of everything she had learned during the past 18 months. The Apache responded to her control inputs with the precision that came from hundreds of hours of practice. The aircraft's systems displayed information that she could interpret and act upon without conscious thought. Most importantly, Maya felt the confidence that came from knowing she was prepared for whatever challenges the evaluation might present. The simulated combat mission required Maya to navigate to a target area using night vision systems, coordinate with ground forces via radio communication, identify and engage multiple targets with different weapons systems, and return to base while managing fuel consumption and mechanical systems. The exercise was designed to evaluate every aspect of her training while maintaining the safety standards required for actual flight operations. Maya executed the mission with the systematic precision that had characterized her approach to aircraft maintenance. She communicated clearly with ground controllers, identified targets accurately using the Apache's sophisticated sensors, and employed weapons systems with the precision that came from months of practice. Most importantly, she demonstrated the situational awareness and decision-making skills that distinguished qualified pilots from students. When the evaluation concluded, Maya had successfully completed every requirement and demonstrated proficiency in all areas of Apache operations. Chief Warrant Officer Sullivan, who had served as her instructor throughout the training program, delivered the news that Maya had been hoping to hear for 18 months. "Rodriguez," Sullivan said, "congratulations. You're now a qualified Apache pilot. But remember that graduation from flight school is not the end of your education. It's the beginning. You'll continue learning for as long as you fly these aircraft." That evening, Maya attended the graduation ceremony where she received her Army aviator wings and the warrant officer rank she had been working toward for over 2 years. As she stood with her fellow graduates, Maya reflected on the journey that had transformed her from a maintenance specialist with an impossible dream into a qualified military pilot. But Maya also understood that her real test would come when she was assigned to an operational Apache unit, where she would be responsible for actual combat missions rather than training exercises. The skills she had learned at Fort Navicelle would have to be applied in environments where mistakes carried consequences that extended far beyond academic grades or training evaluations. As Maya prepared for sleep on her final night at flight school, she thought about the Apache she had repaired nearly 2 years ago, the hydraulic accumulator that had sparked a conversation about dreams and possibilities. Tomorrow, she would begin her career as a pilot, flying aircraft that other maintenance specialists would prepare for her according to the same standards of excellence she had always maintained. Outside her window, Maya could hear the familiar sound of helicopters conducting night training operations. But, for the first time in her life, she knew that soon she would be the one inside those aircraft, applying everything she had learned about flying, fighting, and the responsibilities that came with being trusted with some of the most sophisticated weapons in the military arsenal. The sound of rotors cutting through the darkness no longer represented something she could only dream about. It represented the reality she had created through determination, hard work, and the willingness to pursue goals that others had considered impossible. Maya Rodriguez had become an Apache pilot, but, more importantly, She had discovered that the limits she had accepted for most of her life were often just starting points for what was actually possible.